Howdy. It's October 2023, and I've finally got round to finishing off the time. Well, the time essays have been published for a while on Orgone, Psychorgone. Psych as in psychology and orgone as in the energy. Psychorgone.com. But I've been meaning to do a video synopsis of the second half of the paper. I did do a synopsis of both papers, I think, but it wasn't very good, I didn't think. So anyway, I've been redoing them. So should we have a wee bit of music first, some like ambient piano, and then we'll discuss the part 2 of the time papers. Yeah, so part 1 was all about looking at the background to why a new theory of time was needed. So it was looking at all the main past theories and looking at what those theories failed to explain, because all the theories seem to have something they do well and something that they don't, and that they all kind of actually tie in together. But we looked at all the background, various main types of time theories, and the anomalies, and what else did we look at? That was it mainly. And so to resolve those anomalies, we thought a new theory of time is needed. So that this, based on, because I've got an orgone theory of consciousness, where orgone and consciousness actually are the same thing, and it's like a form of panpsychism. I call it idiophysicalism, because it's saying that the mind and ideas are actually physical things, and vice versa. But this theory of time is based on that. So all the theories have something right but something wrong. Like time can't just be events, because there's a subjective sense of time as well. And if time was just events, if you took away all clocks or all things that could act as clocks, then time would stop. But even in a dream, there is time. And there's no clocks or physical material objects rather, in a dream. Relativity fails because there's subjective aspects, and there's things that can travel faster than the so-called speed of light. Platonic theories of like an eternal time, that fails as well, because we do experience change, and there doesn't seem to be everything totally written in stone. And the same with presentism, just that there's only the present, because if there's only the present, everyone's present is different, and the present moment can be transcended with like non-locality. Like two things can happen at the exact same time in different parts of the universe. And time can't just be Hegel's unfolding of space. Well, it can, if that space is realized to be what Hegel called absolute spirit, or what I call the idiophysical orgone, or just the orgone really. You don't have to give it any posh words. Orgone is conscious, that's it really. But because orgone is conscious, and because all the time theories are right to an extent but wrong as well, like there's not a single time theory that's not got a hole in it really, apart from maybe the biblical view and Hegel's view if you look at it from a kind of the perspective of all of his work rather than just take it in separation. But if physicality and physicality is orgone and consciousness and orgone are the same thing, well, time can have aspects of all the different theories, but at its most simple, if physicality is and consciousness is orgone, the flow of the universe is time, and the flow of and whether that flow is subjective or objective, it's still a flow, whether it's apparently in the mind or apparently in the environment. It's a flow of orgone, and that flow is the same as consciousness. So in the orgone time theory, the first the, the, the first aspect of it is that there's a universal organotic time, and that's the flow of the orgone as a whole throughout the universe. So basically, in the whole theory, in a nutshell, time is the flow of consciousness. Consciousness is orgone, and there's different types of time, but all the different types of time are contained within the universal organotic time, or the universal time. So that's enough for now, isn't it? Shall we have a bit of blues? And that's enough of that. So you got the universal organotic time. That's the first aspect, and that's the whole. That's all the orgone in the whole universe. But it's got some peculiar qualities as time. One, it transcends this whole. All the orgone in the universe are considered as a whole. It's not still, because orgone always has movement, and consciousness always has movement. You cannot have consciousness that's completely still, because even if you were the only thing in the whole universe, all there was your perception, no objects, no other things. You'd still perceive yourself, and any perception has got a sense of flow. So it's impossible for time to be completely still. But within the universal time, the flows of time are transcended by the universal time. So from the point of view of the universal time, the relative flows inside seem still, but the universal time still has its own movement, and that's where there's a paradox. Um, so time has a paradox, but it isn't itself a paradox, despite people sometimes thinking that, because time is just the flow of consciousness, and the flow of consciousness isn't in itself a paradox. Um, so this universal organotic time, it transcends all movement. It is consciousness. It's the universal organotic time would be God's consciousness. It's not Newtonian because it's not a kind of non-time that contains everything, like a background thing where everything just ticks away. So like Newton's view of a kind of an absolute container, it's like a non-time. It's an emptiness. So everything real happens as objects in this non-time. Um, and it's not Platonic exactly either, because Plato's like um, eternally sort of static um, time, uh, from whence other things are just a moving perception of the eternal time, is not quite right, because because the universal time itself has development and change and movement, because uh, God is consciousness, and consciousness is never still. Um, so I think that pretty much covers the universal organotic time. So that's it's transcendent of any movement or any stream within it, but itself has movement. Um, and then the universal orgone time splits into group time streams, uh, and those because a group of people are a group of conscious entities. Each conscious entity is a vortex of time. So, and if all those vortexes get together, they have like a consensus time traveling through the universal time, and then individuals within that consensus time can move around within that group time stream. It's a bit similar to the moving block theory in time, and then um, lastly, there's energetic time, because all objects will have time as well, because an object is a condensation of orgone. So the greater the mass of the object, the more time it will contain. So the theory, the energetic time, sort of has aspects of relativity theory in it. The universal time has aspects of like Platonic um, and like Buddhist views of time. And the individual and group time streams that has aspects of like David Icke's view of time and the kind of holographic views. But the only difference really is that although there's David Icke's view of time is essentially eternalism, a dynamic eternalism, which is saying like everything's happened, just your view or your slice through the eternal cake gives you your particular angle on the chocolate cake that is the universe. But that chocolate cake's always changing, because God don't like to stay still apparently, because God is consciousness. Anyway, so there you have it, the universal organotic time, which is the same as orgone, which is the same as consciousness. So the universal orgone time is the universal flow of consciousness. The group time streams are the group flow of consciousness. Individual time streams are the individual flows of consciousness, which can change. They can jump about or even be in two places at once. And the group time streams have a relationship to the individual time streams and the orgone, the universal time So there's a kind of organotic relativity there between the different types of time, and it would indicate like backwards and forwards causation is possible, and time travel both psychic and and actual bodily. So, how to test the theory we'll do next. We'll have a bit more. Let's have some ambient music. What key shall we pick? What did you say? Um, C minor. Okay. So, lastly, how would you test such a theory? Well, if consciousness equals orgone, and orgone orgone's flow is the same as the flow is the same as time. So the flow of orgone is the flow of consciousness, which is time. So those three things you can kind of chuck around as an equation: consciousness, orgone, and time. And the more density you have, the slower the time goes, because density is a condensation of orgone. So time equals consciousness times orgone charge divided by density. Um, so how could you test such a thing? Well, you could look at if there's an increase in an orgone field, is there changes in time, the perception of time? Um, and that there seems to be evidence for that, and already, which is detailed in the paper. Some like paranormal evidence and just general stuff. So, like shamans have a different perception of time, and they seem to have a higher concentration of like life force or organ. And some of the Jenny Randall's her observations of these weird time storms seems that they have a lot of orinal effects, which is charged orgone. And orinal and paranormal stuff always seems to go together. So, and orinal is excited orgone. So you can test that by also you could see if there was actual material changes in time associated with like the claims of paranormal time changes. Do they go with orinal effects? And you could just try getting a huge amount of orgone or orinal and see if that changes people's time perception, or maybe even some other effect on time. It's very hard to understand because there's three aspects to time and to physicality. So it's very hard to understand using Reich's common functioning principle, which used to take a dialectic, say mind and body, and trace that back to what's the root of both of those two dialectics. So you've got mind and body, and they trace back to bioenergy. Um, but you can't really have consciousness without orgone physicality. Like you can't be conscious of nothing, or it wouldn't be consciousness. And as soon as you're conscious of something, there's a physical element. Like being conscious of anything is physicality. The more people or the more things you are conscious of something, the more continuation it has, the more physicality it has. There's no physicality without consciousness, and vice versa. And you can't have consciousness or physicality without time, because time is the flow of consciousness. Like you can define time in lots of different ways, but they all fail at some point. The only one that includes all the other is time as flow of consciousness, as far as I can see. So you've the common functioning principle, or the dialectic process of finding the root that Reich had, doesn't really work, because there's three roots. So there's consciousness, orgone, physicality, and time. So I put those as a um, as a triangle, really. And then so you've got triangle, consciousness, orgone, physicality, and time. And then you've got a surrounding. I chose the Ouroboros because although it's a snake, and like snakes and reptilians and stuff have some bad associations for some people, or maybe some planets, but the it's a very good symbol for the Ouroboros, because it's moving, it's conscious, and it's alive. And I suppose God created it at some point. So that contains the triangle of consciousness, orgone, physicality, and time, and that about sums it up. And I prefer typing and playing music to talking, so my lung chi is done in now. So that's it, folks. So au revoir, and should we play out with some blues? I don't think so. Let's have some ambience. And the next one I'm going to do is going to be about well, it's in my it's in my new book, which is like all my research from the last 25 years in one place, which you can find on my blog. A link to it from my blog on leonsouthgate.blogspot.com. But there's I'll put the essay on my blog as well, because it's not been published anywhere outside the book. It's about how intelligence is a completely different thing to consciousness, because we can't really understand how the AI, when we don't really understand what intelligence is in relation to consciousness. So that's my next one, and I think I'll go out now.